so that we have a day for each act. It's probably not going to be enough time. One, because it's a pretty long play, and it's compared to something like Midsummer Night's Dream. Well, all of the tragedies compared to the comedies, they're just dense with not necessarily information, but with meaning, psychological depth, and such like that. On page 1602 of the 8th edition of your text, 10th edition of your text, you get an introduction, 1602, 1603. You get a very brief introduction to the play, where a couple of things that I want to point out are mentioned. One, Hamlet falls within the revenge tragedy genre. What does that mean? It's a tragedy governed by the principle of revenge. That's it. It dates back to the Roman period. Seneca is the great author of revenge tragedies. And revenge tragedies kind of revived in Shakespeare's day by a contemporary and just a little bit older than Shakespeare, writer by the name of Thomas Kidd, who publishes in 1587 a play called The Spanish Tragedy. That kind of opens the floodgates for revenge tragedy. So that after 1587, you start to get several revenge tragedies being published and performed, so that by the time Shakespeare comes around to write one, Hamlet, 1600, the genre's getting a little bit old. So Shakespeare kind of infuses it with new blood. He kind of revives it. And he does that a couple of ways. He takes the classical revenge tragedy that works essentially this way. Somebody is murdered. The ghost of that murdered person comes to a family member, usually son, brother, says, "I've been murdered, avenge my death." So the plot then flows from that, where the person that is addressed by the ghost has got to exact revenge for the ghost's death. Okay? And that usually results in a bunch of dead bodies on the stage. I mean, in some of the classical tragedies, I mean, you've got 5, 6, 7, 8 people. By the time you get to Hamlet, the end of Hamlet, in the final scene, you're going to have 4 bodies on the stage at the end. Now, in ancient Greek literature, or drama, which we're going to start when we finish Hamlet, you'll see when somebody is killed, or when somebody, as Oedipus does in the play Oedipus the King, gouges his eyes out. He takes a pair of stick pins that his wife's been wearing on her cloak, and he takes the pin part and gouges his eyes out. All of that kind of action occurs off stage, because it was considered to be too gory. So what was called spectacle, that kind of violent action, always occurs off stage. Shakespeare's day, nope, it's right there on the stage. So that in one of Shakespeare's great plays, King Lear, a guy comes up to another guy, and let me say Ray is the person who's going to get his eyes pulled out. He's sitting in this chair, he's got his arms tied behind his back and everything, and the other guy comes up and puts his foot kind of like on the other guy's leg, so that he can reach in and with his finger pop the eyeball out. Okay? That happens on the stage. Not literally, obviously. You don't blind somebody for each performance. Okay? But it was taken to be normal then. So that's kind of revenge tragedy. Another big difference is Shakespeare makes Hamlet this deep thinker. Hamlet's the one who has to exact revenge. Okay? And he thinks the entire play, from when he first hears in Act 1, the ghost of his father says, "Avenge my death," he thinks, how? How do I do that? And he thinks through the end of Act 1, how do I do that? And all of Act 2, and all of Act 3, and all of Act 4, and he finally comes up with it in 5. But all the time while he's thinking, he's beating himself up because he's not acting. He's not doing it. He hasn't, by Act 3, avenged his father's death. So Hamlet becomes this type of the person paralyzed by thought. The person who can't act because he or she thinks too much. They're too intellectual. They're not active enough. Okay? So, let's look at our dramatis personae on 1603. Claudius, king of Denmark. Okay? Hamlet, son to the late and nephew to the present king. Now, if I were doing this edition, I would give a little bit more information. I would say Claudius, king of Denmark, brother of the dead king. Okay? Hamlet, son of the dead king, nephew to the living king, which is, given there. And maybe even for Claudius, brother of the dead king, current king, uncle of Hamlet. Just to really emphasize all that. Polonius, the Lord Chamberlain. And if you remember from talking about Shakespeare, the Lord Chamberlain's men, the Lord Chamberlain is the next kind of most powerful person. Then you have Horatio, friend of Hamlet's, Laertes, son of Polonius, and then you have a bunch of courtiers, and then you have a bunch of officers. Okay? Who's not mentioned on that page? Gertrude, Ophelia. Why are they not listed till the end? Because they're women, and your editor's sexist? Not sure. I probably would have put Gertrude right after Claudius. Wife to Claudius, wife to the dead king. Okay? So the previous king was married to Gertrude. He's dead. She's now married his brother. Any problems with that?
Yes.
What are they? It's incest. And guess what? In Shakespeare's day, it was incest. Why? When does it start being called incest? Go all the way back to the Old Testament book of Leviticus. How long back is that? That's a couple thousand years minimum, 3,000 years minimum, maybe 4,000 or 5,000 years. In other words, it's a long time ago. Okay? So the play opens with a question. Who's there? What does the question imply? What's the question asking, first of all? I know, surface level, easy answer. Who's there? That means the person who's asking doesn't know who's there, right? Okay. Now go a little bit deeper. What else does that mean? The person who's asking who's there is obviously doing what? I mean, you don't just walk around and go, who's there? Patrolling. Okay. What else? Louder? Could be sneaking around. What else? If you're asking who's there, you've heard something, you've seen something, you've observed something. That is, you're watching, you're looking. Okay? Observing, watching, looking, those are all kind of neutral. Right? That is, there's nothing negative about doing those things. How can you take the idea that each of those kind of conveys and make it a little bit, or even a whole lot, negative? What's another word you could use that is really negative? If you're observing somebody, watching somebody, looking at somebody without their knowledge, what are you doing? Spying. You are spying. Okay? All of this is a major theme in the play. In fact, we're going to hear later on, one of the characters is going to describe Hamlet as the most observed of all observers. And what the character means by that is everybody in the kingdom seems to be looking at everybody else. But the one person watched the most, that's Hamlet. Hamlet, according to that individual, Hamlet therefore lives what kind of existence? He's like in a fishbowl. He has no privacy. He's under a magnifying glass all the time. Okay? So, who's there? Nay, answer me. Stand and unfold yourself. Long live the king. Bernardo, so we see Bernardo, Francisco, they're talking. Then Horatio comes in, and Marcellus. What do they start talking about? Have you told Horatio about what we saw the other night? Horatio says, bottom of that page, line 24, "'Tis but our fantasy." What did Theseus say about imagination? Because that's what's meant by fantasy. Imagination has the power to do what? Body forth the forms of things unknown, to give a local habitation and a name to airy nothing. Marcellus is saying, Horatio says, we have too wild of imaginations. Horatio doesn't believe. They've seen what they've said they've seen. What have they said, or are very shortly going to say, they've seen? The ghost of whom? The dead king. Horatio says 'tis but our fantasy, and will not let belief take hold of him. He won't believe it. Touching this dreaded sight, twice seen of us. So, you can understand, okay, maybe their mind was playing tricks with him once. But 2 nights in a row? So I asked him to come along with us. In other words, he won't believe us because he hasn't what? Seen it for himself. Go back to the Gospels for a moment. After Christ is resurrected, he appears to the disciples, okay, in the upper room. All the disciples are there, okay, except for one, Thomas. And the disciples tell Thomas the following week, we've seen the Lord. He rose from the dead, like he said. And Thomas says, unless I put my finger through the hole in his hand and my hand in his side, I will not believe. The next week, they're all together again. The door is locked. And Jesus appears. He doesn't walk through the door. He just, whip. And he taps Thomas on the shoulder. Thomas turns around and Jesus goes, come on, do it. Come on, feel it. What does Thomas say? My Lord and my God. Christ says, blessed are you who have seen and believe, but more blessed are those who haven't seen and believed. Okay? Horatio hasn't seen and doesn't believe. So that's why he's there that night. So, the ghost enters. Now, Horatio sees it with his own eyes. And Marcellus says, speak to it, Horatio. Why should Horatio speak to it? Thou art a scholar. Okay? You've got a gloss there, line 42 or so. Exorcisms were performed in Latin, which Horatio, as an educated man, would be able to speak. Yeah, but we're not being told that he's saying, Horatio, cast out that demon. It's not what's meant there. Speak to it, Horatio. So they say, it looks like the king. And Horatio says, what art thou that usurps this time of night? What does it mean to usurp something? What did Claudius, we find out shortly, do to Hamlet Sr. other than kill him? He usurped the kingdom. Who should the kingdoms be after Hamlet Sr. dies? Hamlet Jr. He usurped that position. Do we have an analog of this in modern popular culture? 1994. One of Disney's most popular movies came out. The Lion King. Mufasa is Hamlet Sr. Scar is Claudius. Simba is Hamlet Jr. Watch that after reading this play, and you're going to go, damn, it is the exact play, almost. I mean, there are a few little changes, but not many. Hamlet doesn't run off to the forest and meet the stupid Mutata Kumbaya or whatever the thing is. The talking meerkat, whatever. Okay? So, what art thou that usurps this time of night, together with that fair and warlike form, in which the majesty of buried Denmark did sometimes march? In other words, you sure look like the dead king. I charge you, speak. How does he charge him? By heaven. That's kind of like, in the name of Jesus, I command you. And Marcellus, it is offended. Why? Does the ghost, give him the middle finger? It'd be interesting to have a production do that. It'd be really interesting. No, but it turns away. Usually is what happens. Bernardo, how do we know? Because Bernardo says, see, it stalks away. So the ghost leaves. They keep talking. Bernardo says, what do you think about this, Horatio? Okay, Bernardo is a soldier. Marcellus is a soldier. Horatio is a scholar. He's been to university. He is still a university student. Make sense of this for me, is what Bernardo is asking him. Before my God, I might not this believe without the sensible and true avouch of mine eyes. That is, I swear by God, I wouldn't have believed this if I hadn't seen it for myself. He's saying, because I have seen it for myself, I do believe it. Is it not like the king? As thou art to thyself. As thou art to thyself means what? Well, you are yourself, right? So how like it is it to the king? It is the king, is what Horatio is saying. Okay? So, and he looked like that when he last fought Norway, Horatio tells us. They keep talking back and forth. And Marcellus asks, line 70, why are we keeping watch? That is, why have we been on patrol this evening? What's going on? Horatio, I can answer that. He says, remember the previous king, our last king, whose image even now but appeared to us, was, as you know, by Fortinbras of Norway, thereto pricked on by a most emulate pride, dared to the comrade. That is, the king of Norway, who is just called Norway here, did what? Challenge the king of Denmark, just called Denmark, to single challenge. Denmark defeated Norway. Okay? So, the king of Denmark killed the king of Norway. The king of Norway has a son, Fortinbras. Fortinbras is now Norway. He's now the king of Norway. Okay? In Germanic society, in Germanic custom, they had this kind of belief system. Briefly put, called the fourfold Germanic ethic. This comes from a scholar named C.L. Wren. 1, 2, 3, 4. Duty to Lord, duty to kin, duty to avenge Lord and kin, and then trust in weird or fate. So, you have a duty to obey, follow your Lord. You have a duty to obey, follow your kin, your family. If something happens to your Lord or kin, you've got a duty, a responsibility to avenge their deaths. And in this, trust in what will be kind of a thing. Fate. Okay? So, Hamlet Sr. killed Norway Sr. What does that mean to Norway Jr.? I'm going to avenge my father's death. Hamlet Sr. was killed by Claudius. We're going to be told shortly. What does that mean for Hamlet Jr.? I've got to avenge my father's death. Okay? Notice, who is Norway Jr. going to avenge? Or who is he going to get his vengeance on? Claudius? Claudius is the current king of Denmark. Okay? But Claudius didn't kill Norway Jr.'s father. Who did? Hamlet Sr. Therefore, his beef is with Hamlet Jr. Okay? You see, everything's going crossways already. I mean, there's just revenge oozing out all over the place. So, he goes on and says what happened. Now, sir, young Fortinbras, of unimproved metal, hot and full, hath in the skirts of Norway here and there sharked up a list of lawless residents. He's saying, young Norway, the new king of Norway, who is young and untested in battle, is pretty hot and full of himself, and he's doing what? He's on the warpath. That's why we are keeping the watch. We have to make sure to be able to warn the king if he shows up. Okay? So, Bernardo says, I think it be no other, but even so, that is, I think you're right. Well may it sort that this portentous figure comes armed through our watch. Portentous. That means this ghost portends something. Portends always has what kind of connotation? Negative. A birthday card 3 days before your birthday in the mail, or email maybe, is not a portentous occasion, unless, it says, thou shalt die in 3 days. No, it's wishing you good tidings and happy birthday and such. Okay? He's saying, this ghost means what? All hell is about to break loose. So like the king that was and is the question of these wars. Horatio, a mote it is to trouble the mind's eye. Mote, speck of dust, eye. What is Shakespeare referring to there? Before you pull the beam out of your neighbor's eye, before you pull the mote out of your neighbor's eye, take the beam out of your own. Don't go nitpicking on other people when you've got all kinds of problems yourself. He says, this is a speck of dust to trouble what? Not the physical eye, the mind. It's the kind of thing the mind will latch hold of and then just start working on. Like you're in a relationship with somebody and that person says something maybe just off the cuff. And you start to think about it. And it just sit there and like that little grain of sand in an oyster shell. What happens to that grain of sand? Well, the oyster keeps secreting juices, and it builds and it builds and it builds and it builds and it builds, and eventually becomes a pearl. What is the pearl for the oyster? It's not like what we consider the pearl to be. For us, the pearl is something valuable. For the oyster, it's like a festering wound. That's why it keeps adding stuff to it. It's trying to cover it. A motive is to trouble the mind's eye. In the most high and palmy state of Rome, and what does he do? He talks about, before Julius Caesar was killed, what happened? There were eclipses. There were shooting stars. The dead rose. Ghosts were seen. Ghost comes back in. And Horatio addresses it again. I'll cross it, that is, I'll cross its path. I'm going to stop it. And do what? Though it blast me. If thou hast any sound or use of voice, speak. And the ghost spreads its arms. If there be any good thing to be done, that may to thee do ease and grace to me, speak. If I can do anything that eases your current situation and that brings grace to me, where does grace come from in the Christian theological tradition? Always. Only from God. So if I could do something that will, to you, that will cause God to shower grace upon me, let me know what it is. If thou art privy to thy country's fate, which happily foreknowing may avoid, who would be doing the foreknowing? The country. That is, if you know what's going to happen, tell us. Why? Because then we'll know, and then we can do what? Stop it from happening. Can you ever stop fate from happening? No, because what's part of the meaning of fate? It's what will happen. So you try to stop fate, and guess what? You make it happen. You don't try to stop fate, and guess what? It happens. That's why we have the bumper sticker. Shit happens. Okay? Replace one word for another. Or if thou hast abhorred in thy life, extorted treasure in the womb of earth, for which they say you spirits oft walk in death, speak. That is, if you've got buried treasure somewhere, and that's why you can't be at peace, let me know. Why? Because Horatio's saying, I'll go dig it up and I'll get it out. And then you can go, requiescat in pacem, rest in peace. Okay? Cock crows, ghost disappears. And they talk about what that means. Horatio says, let's go tell Hamlet. For upon my life this spirit will speak to him. So we get scene 2. Scene 1 was on the parapet of the castle of Elsinore. Scene 2 is inside the castle of Elsinore. And if you want to watch a version of this to help, and it will help you understand it, don't watch the Mel Gibson one. It's horrible. I probably would not watch the Kenneth Branagh one because he assumes some things that aren't proven in the text. If you can watch it, I don't think it's available on YouTube. I know parts of it are available on YouTube. The Richard Burton 1964 Broadway rehearsal, ARSAL, version is, I think, the best one there is. Right? It's not the full-blown production. It's a rehearsal. It's kind of a dress rehearsal. Okay? But this Richard Burton was still fairly young here. I don't know, 40, maybe 45. Young to me, old to you. But he just nails it out of the park. So, the king comes in. And he gives us this big, long speech. And what is he essentially saying in the entirety of this nearly 40-line speech? You know, I'm sorry that my brother is dead. But my sorrow has been turned into joy. Why? Because I married his wife. That's pretty much it. And not only did I marry his wife, but all of you agreed to this. Which is why he says, therefore, line 8 or so, our sometime sister, now our queen, you, just wrong, the imperial jointress to this warlike state, have we, as 'twere with a defeated joy, with an auspicious and a dropping eye, with mirth and funeral, dirge and marriage, in equal scale weighing delight and dole, take it to wife. Nor have we herein barred your better wisdoms, which have freely gone with this affair along. So everybody, he's implying, or at least all of his advisors who come in, agreed to this. He's the king. What kind of authority does he have? That is different, let's say, from a president of the United States. He has all the authority. The president does not have all the authority. The president cannot, quote unquote, dissolve Congress. The president cannot pass laws. The king could. Okay? So, Cornelius and Voltimand respond to what the king says, and then the king addresses Laertes, Polonius' son. Asks what he wants. He says, I want to go back off to France. What did your father say? He says, okay, then you can go. So then he addresses his quote-unquote son, stepson / nephew. But now, line 63, 4. But now, my cousin Hamlet and my son. You've got a gloss there for cousin. Any kin not of the immediate family. That is, not of the nuclear family. So cousin can mean literal cousin, but it can also mean nephew. It can mean uncle. Okay? It's just anybody kind of one step removed. It can mean son-in-law, daughter-in-law. Now my cousin Hamlet and my son. So the first reference is to extended family, but son? That means really close. And Hamlet delivers an aside. Again, what does an aside do?
It lets the person say it to the audience, but without anybody else.
Right. Nobody else on the stage hears what Hamlet says. Hamlet looks to the audience and says, a little more than kin and less than kind. A little more than kin means I'm a little bit more to you than just cousin. Why? You're my father's brother. You're my uncle. And less than kind means unnatural. My relation to you now is unnatural. It goes against nature. Why? You married your brother's wife. Just wait till we get to Oedipus. Oedipus marries his mother and then has children by them. So his children are his brothers and sisters. He doesn't know it's his mother when he marries her. Okay? So, a little more than kin and less than kind. That's to the audience. How is it that the clouds still hang on you? How many of you have ever seen the old, you would never see this, so I can't refer to it. There used to be a TV, a cartoon kind of series when I was growing up, 60s and 70s. And there's this character in it named Glum. And Glum would always walk around, and he had a cloud over him. And the cloud was always raining. The Disney Winnie the Pooh cartoons did this also, with the character Eeyore. Eeyore was always gloomy, and he always had the rain cloud over him. So, how is it that the clouds still hang on you? Hamlet, not so, my lord. I'm too much in the sun. Too much in the sun? What's the sun? It's not the ball of flaming gas out in the sky. The sun is your presence. He says, I'm too close to you. What is Hamlet going to ask very shortly? Let me go back to university. That is, let me leave here and go to Elsinore. Go to Wittenberg. And Gertrude, his mother's going to go, no, Hamlet, we want you to stay here. Oh, okay. So, the queen, good Hamlet, cast thy nighted color off. What is thy nighted color? Why I wore it today. He's wearing all black. Why is he wearing black? Mourning. He's in mourning. You don't wear bright, flowery colors to a funeral. That's just tacky, okay? He's wearing black. Cast thy nighted color off, and let thine eye look like a friend on Denmark. Do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust. Why veiled lids, and why seek for thy noble father in the dust? Is she saying Hamlet, regularly goes out into the woods and starts digging? Dad, are you here? No. Why does she say your eyes are veiled? Well, if you walk around and you're not wearing glasses, and you're walking around and you're looking at the ground, and other people look at you, if they see your eyes at all, what do they see? Just the lids. That's what she means. It's not walking around like this with his eyes closed. Right? Why his eyes in the dust? He's just looking at the ground. Why? Because nothing out here means anything. This is telling us about Hamlet's internal state. He wears black. Why? Because he's in mourning. And he doesn't take any joy in anything. So, thou know'st 'tis common. What is it that is common? All that lives must die. Passing through nature to eternity. All that lives must die. That is common, right? That common means it happens to everything. You ever known someone, something that hasn't died? I don't mean died yet, but like a great, you get 3 back. I don't think anybody has any great grandparents alive. Unless, great grandma started having kids when she was 10. And then great grandma had kids when she was 10. And then great grandma had, not likely. I, madam, 'tis common. He goes, yeah, that's right. Happens to everybody. Well, if it be, why seems it so particular with thee? If it is common that everything that lives dies, why is it so particular to you? That is, she is saying, why are you so hung up on your father's death? Cold woman. I mean, heartless. Consonant itch. Hamlet. Seems, madam? What kind of verb is seems? Anybody know? Hate it when this happens. It is subjunctive verb. What in the world does subjunctive mean? It represents a condition contrary to fact. Donald Trump seems to be a very humble person. That is a condition contrary to fact. Donald Trump would never say that about himself. Nobody in his family would say that about himself. Okay? pick some porn star. XYZ seems to be a very wholesome person. No, you don't say that. Okay? Because it's a contemporary fact. Seems, madam, 'tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother. The good mother, he's being sassy. Nor customary suits of solemn black. That's all he wears. Nor windy suspiration of force of breath. He's walking around sighing all the time. No, nor the fruitful river in the eye. And he's crying a lot. This will blow your mind when you find out how old he actually is. Nor the dejected haver of the visage, together with all forms, moods, shapes of grief, that can denote me truly. Notice he doesn't say connote. What's the difference between a denotation and a connotation? Denotation is the literal meaning. Connotation has other meanings. Okay? Blue. It's a color. What is a connotation of blue? If you're feeling blue today, it doesn't mean you're walking around and you're all blue colored. It means you're a little bit sad or moody possibly. So he says all these things cannot denote me truly. These indeed seem. Why? Because if you're good at it, Bill Clinton was a master, you could cry at a moment's notice. Okay? Anybody can wear black. Anybody can walk around and go, anybody can look at the ground all day long. Anybody can feign sorrow. They are actions that a man might play. Another big theme. Play acting. How many people within the play are playing a role? I don't mean actors playing the characters. I mean within the world of the play itself. How many characters seem they're not being real? But I have that within, he says, which passeth show. What does that mean? Which passeth show. I have something inside, cannot be revealed. Cannot be acted out. All these other things, the inky cloak, the suits of solemn black, the windy suspiration of force of breath, the fruitful river in the eye, these are but the trappings and the suits of woe. These seem. He says, the fact is inside. Bear in mind, he doesn't know yet that his father was murdered. So if all these things are appearances of the reality inside, what do you think is going to happen when he finds out dear old dad didn't just die of natural causes, but was murdered? 'Tis sweet and commendable, the king says, in your nature, Hamlet, to give these morning duties. Well done. That a good son should mourn his father. But always implies what? You get a change. You get a contrast. But you must know your father lost a father. That father lost his. And the survivor bound in filial obligation for some term to do obsequious sorrow. That is, when your father dies, you are bound for some term to mourn. But that term what? Has an ending. You don't get to mourn forever. But to persevere, in obstinate condolement, obstinate mourning. Obstinate means what? Pig-headed, stubborn, unchanging. Is a course of impious stubbornness. Impious means what? Not pious. Okay, so what does pious mean? right belief, right action, but it's right religious belief and action. So impious is wrong religious belief. That is, it goes against God. Okay? So, if you show obstinate mourning, then you are showing stubbornness that is against God and unmanly grief. Unmanly, what is he just called Hamlet? A woman. Which for a Germanic man in this time period, that's about the lowest thing you could be called. Okay? He's emasculated him essentially. 'Tis unmanly grief. It shows a will most incorrect to heaven, a heart unfortified, that is, you're a weakling, a mind impatient, you cannot endure problems, and understanding simple and unschooled. Why? Because what we know must be and is fate is as common as any of the most vulgar thing to sense. Why should we in our peevish opposition take it to heart? Why get upset with the way things must be? Can you change it? Can you stop death? People try. People are trying today. There's just a study out the other day saying, you know what? Take young blood, put it in old things, and the old things live longer. It's the basis behind what genre of novels. Starts with a D, ends with an or starts with a V, ends with an ire. Dracula, vampires. Because what do vampires do? They suck the blood of people so that they go on living. Okay? So, come on, Hamlet, suck it up, be a man, etc. So she begs Hamlet, the queen does, stay in Wittenberg. He says, I will. Everybody leaves but Hamlet. Hamlet gets a soliloquy. Yeah, I didn't think we'd get that too. Notice Hamlet's very first soliloquy. What issue does he raise in the opening lines? Oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. The first folio reads, oh, that this too solid flesh. But notice what he's asking the flesh to do. Melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. Why? The melt, thaw, and resolution, resolving, that's an image of purification. Take a glass of, this is tap water, and to purify it would do what? To take out all imperfections, to take out all impurities. And theoretically, if you were to do that with this, you would have a little bit less. That's resolve itself into a dew. To take a human body and resolve itself into a dew, he means like a dew drop. Why? Resolve, melt down all of this into like a drop of water. What is that saying? What is that saying about most of this? It's imperfect, it's rotten, it's corrupt. That's why it's, oh, that this too sullied. Because what does sully mean? Stained, rotted, corrupted. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. Self-slaughter, that is the native English form for the Latin suicide. Self, sui, or sui, slaughter, side. Suicide. How weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to be all the uses of this world. That's why he walks around looking at the ground, because he doesn't see anything that brings him any joy. Life sucks for Hamlet. and then you die. Only for him, he doesn't die soon enough. Then it should come to this. What? But 2 months dead. His father. Nay, not 2. Not even 2 months. And she already remarried. And what does he say about his father? He was a Hyperion. Who was Hyperion? Apollo, god of the sun. And compared to him, what is his uncle? A satyr. What's a satyr? Man and beast. Remember the great chain of being? Humanity here, angelic, divine things farther up, beast down below. His father was like a god. His uncle was like a beast. And Horatio and them come in. And what do they tell him? Well, we saw your father. When? Where? Last night? We saw his ghost appear. Okay? I'm skipping a bunch that I didn't really want to skip. Hamlet says, okay, I'll keep watch with you. They all leave. He gets another soliloquy. Page 1615. Before the soliloquy, Hamlet says, if it assume my noble father's person, line 242 or so, I'll speak to it though hell itself should gape and bid me hold my peace. Don't tell anybody what you've seen. They leave, Hamlet's left. My father's spirit in arms, all is not well. I doubt, meaning I expect, some foul play. Would the night were come. Till then, sit still, my soul. Foul deeds will arise. Why does he say sit still, my soul? He's saying, down, boy. Because his soul wants what? Go back to the long soliloquy. He's done. He's tired of it. He's thinking about suicide already in the first act of the play. But what? Okay, down. Got to talk to Dad first, see what's going on. Okay, we'll stop there and pick up and finish. I don't know when. Let's maybe have a quiz. I'm not saying definitely, but if there is, it'll just be over Acts 1 and 2 on whatever day that is. Friday.